Welcome to P3, I'm Randall Mark. This is a show that explores the fascinating people, places, and perspectives that make up our world. On today's show, we take you halfway around the world to Jerusalem, where we meet up with a world expert on the characters of the Old Testament. And then we meet a Nobel Prize winner who says how you play games reveals who you are. This is P3. Sex, violence, conflict, and drama are par for the course when it comes to the Old Testament characters. These ancient stories have been passed down for generations, and according to one expert, Dr. Yair Zakovich, a professor of the Bible at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, they can teach us a lot about what it means to be human.
Professor, we're at the Center for Jewish Studies. You teach biblical studies. Your passion is obviously for the biblical text. Let me start with this question. I know that you're one of the experts on the stories of Jacob. The story of Jacob wrestling with an angel or God on the eve of him meeting his brother Esau. What do you think the significance of that story is?
Well, if we go back, actually, we have some stories about Jacob that some people would have preferred to forget about. These are the stories about Jacob cheating his brother, cheating everybody else, cheating his father. And Jacob slowly learned his lesson. When he comes back, he's still so eager to be blessed, but this time he's not going to cheat anymore in order to get a blessing. He's ready to wrestle, even with an angel. But getting a blessing is the most important thing for Jacob.
What's significant about the story to me is that his name gets changed to Israel.
Yeah.
What is the significance of that name in that moment of time for him?
You know, the name Jacob, his original name Yaakov, may be interpreted in two ways. One way, which you get in the book of Genesis in chapter 25, is that he's holding to the heel of his brother, Akev. That's the reason. But there was another explanation, that actually already in the womb of his mother, he cheated his brother. Already in the womb he was cheating. And the prophet Hosea, you know, somewhere in the margin, you find this rejected tradition about him being the cheater. The root Akov means to cheat. And his brother, 2 chapters later, in chapter 27, Esau is actually blaming him. He says, well, he was named Jacob because he cheated me twice. So when the name is changed, he is not the cheater anymore, he's Israel. And the name Israel is also a very interesting name. Again, on the one hand, the official explanation you get, he's named Israel because he's Sarah, he wrestled. But the name Israel is also related to being Yashar, being straight, honest, meaning he is not a cheater anymore.
He's changed.
He has changed.
He had this moment of wrestling with the divine.
And that's the beauty of biblical narratives. You know, there are no perfect people there. I'm not perfect. Perhaps even you are not perfect. I don't know. I don't know, but let me speak for myself. I'm far from being perfect, and my wife mentions it every morning. But so I cannot learn anything from perfect people. It's a different species. So the Bible tells you about people who are imperfect. And you can learn from their mistakes, from their mistakes, and also from the way they pay for their mistakes. Because Jacob, for cheating his brother, for cheating his father, paid a terrible price. And if he made a mistake and paid for it, I should learn from it that if I make a mistake, I'll pay for it too.
The complexity of the biblical narrative, both from the Genesis story on, it always speaks of these people who are deeply flawed. The book of Judges, for instance, the people that would massacre and kill, and yet somehow they're called by God to lead people. How do you make sense of that?
Well, look at the leaders we have nowadays. I'm not talking politics at all. But you know, even our leaders are not perfect. Not only the judges. Let's look at King David, who becomes like a prototype of the Messiah. King David, who's far from being perfect. And yet, again, only these imperfect people are interesting enough for us. And the Bible is not interested in idol worshipping, in us worshipping human beings. The Bible is interested in ideas and in educating us. Through these characters, the characters who are only vehicles for carrying ideas, the Bible succeeds teaching us and educating us. Look at David. Look how tragic his life was. You know that the story of David, for instance, is repeated again in the book of Chronicles. Have you ever read the book of Chronicles?
Yes, I have.
Oh, poor thing.
I know. As a child, I was forced to.
Oh, yeah, but it's such a boring book because David in the book of Chronicles is perfect. And perfect people are so boring. Nobody actually, if not being forced, nobody reads the book of Chronicles. So in the Second Temple period, they have already started telling about perfect people. Who wants to read their stories?
Let me ask you this. In the Hebrew understanding of the creation narrative, is it mythological, this sense of the Garden of Adam and Eve? Do they stand for myth, or are these real individuals that they're speaking of?
Look, when you watch a play in the theater, are these real people? Or again, these are actors who represent something. So of course, Adam and Eve, I didn't know Adam. I'm old, but not old enough to know Adam. And anyway, I was not created when he was there in the garden. But of course, again, the whole story of the garden carries a message. Don't forget that the story of the Garden of Eden, it's the very beginning of the world. And immediately, the first human couple, again, makes a mistake, sin, and they pay for it, and they are actually exiled from the Garden of Eden. And that's something for us to remember and to learn a lesson from, and we don't learn anything from it. Because what happens at the end of the book of Kings, when we reach actually the end of this historical story, we find ourselves in exile in Babylon.
Again, kicked out of...
And anyway, on the way, even in Genesis, if you just move from chapter 3 to chapter 11, the story of the Tower of Babylon, again, the same thing. Human beings are challenging God. They want to climb to heaven. They want to take God's place. And what is the price? They are being exiled. And see, that's something very interesting. You have these 11 chapters in the book of Genesis before we, the Israelites, make our first step on the stage of history. As if God it's not that God didn't wake up on time or the alarm clock didn't work, one of these excuses that my students tell me all the time when they are late to class, but there is a reason for being late. God wanted us to learn from the mistakes of others. See, Adam and Eve were exiled. The people who built the tower were exiled, were scattered all over the globe. You should learn from it, but we don't. So biblical historiography is actually a very sad story, a very pessimistic story. Very pessimistic, but there is always some hope. Because even when we are exiled at the end of the book of Kings, we realize, we understand why we were exiled. And the moment you understand that you are wrong, that you committed the sin, there is always a chance for a second beginning.
For you spend your days, your life studying these texts, reading these stories,
nights.
and your nights studying these texts.
Some of them.
Does this hold spiritual significance to you, or is this just a story of history that you learn from? Does this pull you into a deeper relationship with Yahweh, with God?
Let's not talk about my personal relationship with God. If you want to interview God,
sure.
you
can
talk
find
to
out
him
about that.
Yeah, but I don't want to talk about my relationship with God. But I'm attracted, of course, to these stories. I don't see in them history or events. I'm not interested to know what really happened. I understand in the Bible as literature, as education, as values, because and as a foundation of our culture. That's our beginning.
Yeah.
And already in the Bible you see all the different strata, one built on the top of the other. Later writers of the Bible know the early strata. They have a conversation, a dialogue with the earlier strata, and then that continues later in literature that was written in the Second Temple literature, then in rabbinic literature. That's what Jewish culture is all about. You know, having a dialogue. We make the old texts always relevant because we go back to them and give them new meaning, new interpretation. And that's the process that keeps me so very interested.
Is that it's alive? It's an alive process.
Exactly. The Bible is alive. It's not a scroll that was being pushed and put aside, covered with dust. It's alive in our culture.
Next on P3, I talked to Dr. Zakovich about the real King David.